And thank you very much for joining us at the Voice of Job Seekers. This is Mark. And if you want to know more about the site and the podcast, go to voiceofjobseekers.com. Hopefully, you've had a great summer if you're just joining us for the first time this season. Other than that, join me in welcoming my usual guest. It seems like every year I think I've had him on since 2015. Marc Miller, the author of Repurpose Your Career for the Second Half of Life. This time it's the third edition. How are you, Mark?
I am doing fine. And as always, it's always great to see you and be on this podcast.
Yes, well, it's always great to be with you. Always great to talk with you. And we were just talking before, and it's like Mark and I talk all the time. So basically, you get to hear the continual conversations that we always talk about. So, so Mark is finishing, if not finished, by the recording or by the publishing. The third edition of Repurpose Your Career, which we talked about in the past couple of years on different occasions. And Mark, generally, things always seem to shift and change, and that's why you always update your book.
That's right. I think, in fact, I've been writing a series of blog posts on the evolution of the book. And when I got started back in 2012, 2013, we were in the depth of the recession. We all knew we had to go back to work. We were soon figuring out that, we weren't going to retire like our parents.
Right.
And the fact is we had to pick ourselves up and go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I produced the second edition in 2017, suddenly Gen Xers were having the same problem that baby boomers were.
Mm-hmm.
Things had gotten better, but they weren't exactly great.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are in 2019, and I start the book out saying, well, we're at full employment. Everybody who wants a job has a job, right? Well, not really.
Mm-hmm.
I'm standing down here in Ajijic, Mexico, but much of my work is done back up in Austin, Texas, where, the general unemployment rate is under 3%.
Mm-hmm.
The unemployment rate for over 50 has been as high as 13 to 14%.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us are figuring out that, we're going to work into our 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes some planning. And I like to say, it's probably not a full-time job. It's in some ways, one of the things I hear from my online community is everybody wants freedom. They want freedom to work on what they want to work, when they want to work, and how hard they want to work,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of sounds like our kids.
Right.
Right. And realizing that, the only safety there is in employment is in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we suddenly say, I'm going to depend on an employer to take care of us, that ain't happening. And, as we talked before, I worked for IBM for 22 years. I thought when I left college and I started my career, I was going to work for 30 or 40 years and ride off into the sunset. And the world doesn't look the same.
No, it doesn't. I guess, in saying that, when people read those statistics, they go automatically, well, I should find a job if it's around the 3 percentile, right? And we all don't read statistically correct because we don't read them parsed out into the little bits of morsels that they really need to be examined and analyzed as such. Because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they don't measure underemployment. Now, it doesn't take a real genius to figure out that if you're older and you want to go back to work, it's not likely you're going to go back to the same gig or type of gig that you had. It's likely that you're going to is going to be a lot different. I have a reader that was a vice president of a college. He just recently retired from Starbucks. From Starbucks. Understand that even though Starbucks has great benefits and some perks, it's not being a vice president of a college. So maybe you could even put that in more perspective for us.
Well, there's no question we are going through tremendous creative destruction,
Mm-hmm.
going through disruption.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I tell anybody, if they want to switch industries, make sure that industry has legs,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., I'd stay away from retail. I have various people say, I'm going to go be a college professor. And I say, right.
Yeah.
Education is being disrupted big time.
Oh, yeah.
And we're seeing this happen all over the place. I'll use the example. I've got two examples where I wrote an article for Forbes several years ago, which is actually part of the book,
Mm-hmm.
of two 65-year-olds who saw their careers blow up in under 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
One was in marketing, and she was in marketing of home building, home sales, real estate. And in Austin, I got her all the way in to the top people at Keller Williams, and Keller
Mm-hmm.
Williams is headquartered in Austin.
Right.
And in fact, I even got her in to talk to Joe Papazano, who helped write the book, The One Thing, with Gary Keller.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only person over 50 in the company. And so when you start looking at that kind of marketing, it's all clicks, analytics. It's all, I was in high-tech marketing back in the 90s. And what I did back then doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
In fact, many of us, when we're of similar age, if you went into marketing and got a marketing degree back in the 70s or 80s, you did it because you didn't have to know any math.
Mm.
Now it's all analytics.
Yeah. There's a discussion that I wrote on for the financial diet, which is a personal finance. And one of the things that I said, what's become obsolete is being able to leverage that you have 20 plus years of experience. And that's usually the beginning of the death of your possibilities, because it's the 20 years isn't even going to be, it's a whole lot less significant now than it's ever been.
Oh,
And
there's
so,
no question.
And so the question, I guess, or part of this discussion now is, how should someone who's older market themselves these days?
Well, one of the things I have a chapter on ageism.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I compare ageism was, I had a 2003 Honda Element that I was trading in.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? The car dealer discriminated against it because, the mechanics weren't new anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Health.
Yeah.
It didn't have the features of the new car skills.
Mm-hmm.
It had some wear and tear on its, and that's your appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, these days, you have to be very, very aware of the skills that you need to acquire, and not depend on the fact that the skills are going to just simply, magically be there. The
Mm-hmm.
skills I've had over 20 years, that's good enough.
Right.
Sorry, not good enough. One of the things we grew up with, the fact that our employers would keep us up to date and train us.
Mm-hmm.
Not true anymore.
Right.
One of the things I tell people is listen to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a podcast for everything. I joke there's a chameleon breeders podcast.
Yeah.
There's right. You need to stay up to date on your nickel. And then when you start marketing it, the two things that you need to do is, number one, your next job, particularly if you're over 50, your next job's going to come through a relationship, period.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges we have is much of our network, the ones that made us successful, those people may have died, retired, or be no longer be in a position of power. So therefore, you have to network. And it's probably network out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And one of the things I got from my own podcast when I interviewed, Ashton Applewhite on ageism, she talks about how we self-segregate. We self-segregate based on age. Most of our friends, our colleagues, they're all about the same age.
Right.
And one of the things she talked about was, go network with people who are much younger. And when I was back in Austin, I did a talk on ageism, and I had a gentleman come up to me afterwards, and he said, "You know what? I volunteered for the Beto O'Rourke for Senate campaign. And boy, did my attitude about millennials change." And I went, wow, that was brilliant.
Well, it's interesting how we look at it when we've gotten older. We think that all of our friends and all of those things that we used to do are still accessible, when we kind of need somebody else to tell us that people don't do that anymore, and people don't think that anymore. The analogy that you kind of started with, well, it wasn't an analogy, but then again, it was. I have a CTS Cadillac 2005. They're not going to want it for its functionality. They're going to want the body, and they're going to only pay for the body. And similarly, the same with older workers. They're not going to pay for your functionality. They're not going to pay for all the things that you're functionally able to do. They may pay for some of the simpler things that you're able to do. It's not going to be very much, and it's not going to be for very long, unless you get some newer parts put in where the function and the body complement each other. So if you can do that, great. For a lot of older people, I don't know. So, I mean, for you and I, we have to learn the new skills, right? For us to operate. We have to learn to not only edit audio, which not that is not an easy task within itself, but we also have to learn to edit video. We have to know how to get it online. We also have to make sure that it makes sense to whoever is looking, no matter who is looking. And if people can just, older workers, older professionals, whatever you want, baby boomers, whatever you want to call you, you've got to kind of make the same transitions as well. There are things that are new that you're going to have to do yourself.
Well, more importantly, even if you don't know you're going to do them yourself, you have to know that they're possible.
Yes.
So I use the example I bring into my online community. I've been bringing in Jean LaFay, who's my image consultant in Austin. And is that me?
I can't hear any. I can hear you fine.
Okay. And so I bring in Jean LaFay, and Jean is my image consultant here in Austin. Jean is 71, and she has started a fulfillment by Amazon business where her first product is a pierced earring back, not the earring, but the back for women with sagging earlobes. And she's marketing under her brand name Wardrobe Jazz. She's sourcing out of China, and it's a fulfillment by Amazon business. And so she's learning Facebook marketing, and I brought her in several times, and people are going, "What? You can do that? Really?" Because you couldn't do it 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I helped a guy pro bono in my job club who had been doing retail arbitrage through fulfillment by Amazon, which is going into becoming a certified vendor for Amazon, walking down into Walmart, the clearance aisles, scanning items, see which ones sell cheap enough that he can pick up and ship them to Amazon and sell them online.
Right. Or is it eBay?
No, it's actually on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
And the point there is that for everybody? The answer is no. But he and his wife enjoyed that stuff.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was several articles here recently about folks who chased across the country when Toys R Us was going out of business,
Mm-hmm.
picking up the hot products and then reselling them on Amazon. And again, you couldn't do that 5 years ago.
No, you couldn't.
Right? So the whole point here is, well, I'm publishing my 4th book. I'm running Amazon ads. I'm running Facebook ads for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
What? You can do that? Yeah, I can publish a book. And, over the last 6 or 7 years, I've sold 5,000, 6,000 copies of my books. Mm-hmm. Am I getting rich doing that? No. but it's a side income. It also fosters other pieces of the business. It's just one piece of the pie. And I can do that. Yeah. And I joke the fact that I this last week was a little stressful because my book cover designer had gone AWOL on me. I sent her a bunch of emails and I didn't hear from her from 2 weeks. And turns out they were going in kind of a bit bucket. Well, Mommy Sarwa, she's done all my book covers, used to live in Austin. She's living in Ghana. Mm. She's gone back to live with her father. And so there we are talking this week on a Facebook call. She's in Ghana and I'm in Mexico. Mm. And she's doing my book cover design.
Yeah. Yeah. and it's interesting. Well, not that it's not interesting. It's only interesting that you should mention that, because I think older workers are still thinking that you have to be in person to really make any traction, when you need to get used to making traction by not being in person. Right? I mean, really, it's one of those things that the image perception that we have these days needs to change, or it needs to broaden, in the sense that now you need to be able to work with people from anywhere in the world. I mean, your next job, even as a baby boomer, could be that the home is in France, or that the home is in Ghana. And you've got to be able to communicate in such a way where the lines are seamless. If you can do that, you can also make some strides in the 2020 gig economy.
There's no question that learning to be adaptable. I brought in my own virtual assistant onto my own podcast inside my own online community, because Stephanie is a virtual assistant. When we got started, she lived in Indiana. Mm-hmm. She now lives with her husband in Florida. Mm-hmm. And, it was one of those deals of where, how did we meet one another? I put a request on LinkedIn saying, I'm looking for a virtual assistant. Mm-hmm. And well, it's similar. I had Hannah Morgan on my podcast here recently on online networking. She's the one who started out saying, Mark, how did we meet? It was online. And we've never met face to face.
Right.
Well, look at our relationship. We've never met face to face.
Nope.
And we're very comfortable talking to one another. And like right before here, my first question was, how are your sons doing?
Yeah. Right. Right.
And, it's, and it's getting comfortable with the fact that the world of work has changed, and it's going to continue to change. And the concept of someone paying you a paycheck. Now, the biggest challenge that we have right now for most of us who are in the 55 to 65 year range is health insurance. Mm-hmm. Right? Health insurance, if to a large extent, if you don't have health insurance tied to your job or your spouse's job, it's really expensive.
Yes.
In fact,
Yes.
I don't care, even if it's tied to your job, it's getting really, really expensive.
Sure it is.
And I mean, that's one reason why I live in Mexico.
Right.
And but I can do that. That is a choice. And I get a lot of people who say, well, I can't do that. Well, why not? Well, because I can't. And, my employer won't allow me, or my spouse won't allow us, or whatever. I said, that's a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I've got a friend from Austin. We met on Facebook. She's renting a place down here. She's a software project manager. And she's spending about half her year down here, and her husband comes down when he can.
Mm-hmm.
But she's decided life is too short. I want to go someplace I want to be,
Mm-hmm.
rather than saying I have to be there.
And those choices, you have to be willing to do what it takes to have those choices.
Yes. Well,
And
the whole point is they are choices.
yes, and they just don't come to you, despite the stories you may hear. They don't come to you very easy. You've got to put yourself in position, uh, and still market yourself and think of yourself as the product that you're marketing.
Yep.
Um,
Well, one of the things I've got a lot of folks in my online community starting their own consulting businesses,
uh-huh.
and I hand every last one of them. I say, go get the book Getting Naked.
Hmm.
Which, by the way, is a great book to have on an airplane because it just has a flat blue cover, and
Hmm.
people are getting naked,
Right. So,
right? And it's a Patrick Lencioni book, and it's about consultative selling. And the concept of getting naked is walking into a client and saying, "What's your problem? I don't know how to solve it. Let's talk about it. Let's see if we can do it together."
hmm.
It's walking in and being vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those of us who've done this a long time, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Uh, right? It's because a lot of times not necessarily, you don't know everything,
Hmm.
but by the way, most of us are resourceful enough that if we don't know something, we can go find out.
Right. Right. And that brings a point that, and I've written several articles about it, and done a couple of podcasts about how you need to approach your job search like a consultant.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what you want. Is can you define? Um, can you first of all kind of inspire, evoke the client or the employer to tell you what the problem is, or can you find out what the problem is, and then you're working on ways to solve it, and you've got to be able to say that I solved it over here. This is how we did it, and this is how we can tweak it for you. And although I'm making it sound like a formula, it's not, but the approach is kind of formulaic in the sense that you are you're looking for the problem and you're being able to solve it, and that's how you're going to earn your keep. And it may be just you're earning your keep for that particular time. That job may last just for that problem. That's where people kind of forget to wrap their head around the whole thing. Then I can go from problem to problem. If you can only solve one problem, that's about as long as you can last. It may be 6 months, it may be a year, unless you can solve all the problems.
Well, the key thing I always tell people, as a employee, you solve problems for your employer. So, what problems have you solved? And then, who has those problems? And more importantly, I have a lot of folks our age who are going, well, I need to go find another job. And I'm going, no, don't look at it that way. what problem do you want to solve?
Mm.
And then go take that, because that's something you'll get excited about. That's something you'll want to go do. And by the way, when we're more excited about it, then we will attack it. We will build our brand. I've got one gentleman in my online community who I'm really proud of, in the fact that he spent most of his career in state and local government doing policy.
Mm-hmm.
And to a large extent, for much of his career, he went in to solve problems. He'd go into a job, last 3 to 5 years, solve the problem, and leave. Or he'd stay 5 to 8 years and not be able to solve the problem because he wasn't allowed to solve the problem, get pissed off and leave.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, and he's nearing 70, I said, so what problem do you want to solve? And he's going, bicycle and pedestrian transportation planning. So he's starting his blog and starting writing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, this is scarier than hell.
Yeah.
But he's starting his consulting practice. He's talking to a bunch of mayors in his area, and he's making progress. And oh, by the way, at the same time, he's teaching a course at the local university online,
Mm-hmm.
which is a whole different world than what you and I have experienced.
Sure.
Right? He was working at a small business development center a few days a week. And all of this is going to kind of help him kind of put together some things that he can do well into his 70s, if not his 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And that he's going to have fun doing. He's going to make money at it. And he can also control how hard he wants to work at this stuff. Because, I joked with several clients. I said, wouldn't it be great if you went to work for yourself, you made, let's say, 80% of what you used to make. You work 80% of the time, but more importantly, you get to fire clients you don't like.
Oh, yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Right?
Having fired a couple of them myself, when I was taking clients, I don't really work with clients, not one-on-one anymore. But I think one of the things is there are choices out there if you're willing to put the time in to think about it and look at it. It just won't come to you served on a platter, for sure.
Well, that's one thing. He started his own blog. We're helping him along doing that,
Mm-hmm.
getting a lot of feedback. And as you know, in doing, I just did a session on podcasting, and I tell everybody it's very similar to doing a blog. Your first material you produce will suck, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you can go back later and delete it.
That's true. Though, it's interesting. I never deleted my first shows.
Well, I know
still up.
I know my first show was hi, I'm Marc Miller, and I'm but on my website I've got probably close to 1,000 blog posts, and I've probably deleted half or as many of that, or as many as that, over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I haven't deleted a lot of them, but I put them back in draft mode, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But I think one of the things that is valuable about your book ultimately is that people will always feel like there's relevant information. People usually write books in one-offs. You're redeveloping and bringing in the newer ideas as time goes along, which I think it makes it a really valuable buy. So the job seeker community should thank you for put such great work into it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I talked in my one blog post about the fact that I follow my buddy Gujan Bergman's philosophy, and Gujan's published 40 self-published books.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you write a book, not the book.
Yeah.
Because you can always go and update stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's better that you do that, because it really deepens the relationship, not between you, the author, and the information, but also deepens the relationship between you and the reader. Yep. And deeper is better. It's not always the quantity that counts. So when should we expect the book to be out? I
Uh,
think the original date was in September, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken.
we're targeting right now the middle of September. I will set a date here in the next couple of weeks. It'll probably launch do a soft launch on a Friday, and we'll do a hard launch on a Monday. And I haven't quite worked out those dates. One of the problems I have is being in Mexico. I can't get a hard physical copy down here.
Mm,
So I am mailing a bunch of proof copies around the US to volunteers to say, please go look at it, make sure it's okay.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think that it's going to be exciting. This will be the first episode of the new season. So you'll get a chance to tell people to get ready for it, which will should help you out a whole bunch too. So those of you who are listening, you can start looking for the book very, very soon.
and
Um,
if they
today,
would like, if they would like to get early copies or early versions of chapters, they can just go to careerpivot.com/RYC team, and I'll give you a bunch of chapters.
good deal. So this will air September 12th,
Oh,
and so that will be near perfect timing.
yep.
So
We will be very, very close to releasing the book.
good deal. So Mark, once again, thank you very much for coming on the show and being the first guest of the new season, which is season number 7, year number 7 for this
Oh, number
podcast.
7.
Yes. I probably just to let audience know, and they noticed that I only do about almost half of what I do, but I have as many listeners that I've had. So to work half as hard yet to retain the same audience has been a beautiful thing. In the meantime, for the rest of you, I look forward to having another show for you in a couple of weeks here on September 26th. So thank you very much for joining me in the Voice of Job Seekers. If you want to leave a comment on the side of the site, you can just press the Speak Pipe Bite button, which is to the right and it's in red. You can leave me a message that way. You can also check through the notes on how else you can contact me. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.